This is the last in a series of 3 webinars for teachers wanting to start using strategy dynamics in there, and it deals with the topic of student exercises and assessment. The webinar was given for people wishing to teach strategy dynamics, whether starting with knowledge of strategy or system dynamics, and you can find out more about the course itself at strategydynamics.com. Just navigate to the online course, where you'll find plenty of information and videos explaining the method and how it relates to standard strategy frameworks. Just a reminder of what this third of the 3 webinars is about. We're trying to serve the needs of teachers primarily, although I know we've got 1 or 2 executives and students involved in the audience as well. And this particular webinar is about exercises that you can give to students or course participants and ways in which you might consider assessing people. So a reminder of a couple of the practical issues. As I say, we've got quite a mix of people taking part in these webinars, and in particular just bear in mind that some people in this audience come from a strategy background and don't know anything about system dynamics or models or systems thinking, and we've got some people coming from a systems thinking point of view who don't know anything about strategy. So just bear in mind that I'm trying to help people on all of those bases. Our purpose here is that we really want to increase the rate of understanding about business dynamics to a much greater degree. I'm not interested in, can we reach another 1 or 2% of the management population here? We've really got to get orders of magnitude increase in this. And getting hold of teachers like we've got on this audience is absolutely key to that. And our aim is to get everyone who could and should be using dynamics in business situations to start doing so. It's not as difficult as I think people have got the impression from the way in which we've tried to teach about dynamics in the past. And what I've tried to do in the course is find as clear and simple as possible a way of getting people to follow the process and how you go about building these dynamic models, whether you do it manually at first or whether you then go on and turn them into software models. What we're selling is what we believe is a much better way to do strategy and a much better way to explain system dynamics. And most of what I'll talk about is free to registered academics and is, we believe, pretty low cost to everyone else as well. I've said on the other 2 webinars that we have to use something to teach this stuff, and naturally we've used our own software platform called Systea, and I'll say more about that this afternoon, because the exercises I'm going to talk about are inevitably built in that. And if people are happier with Insight Maker or Advensim or iThink or whatever, then you can, of course, copy what I've done in your own preferred software. So to get into this issue then of the exercises and assessment that you use for teachers and participants, we need to think about a couple of things first of all. First is, who are you teaching? And there's all kinds of people teaching all kinds of groups. So some people I know are teaching undergrads, some are teaching master's students or PhDs, some people are trying to train executives. I had my first experience of teaching undergrads last year, and it was interesting, to say the least. They're a very different audience than master's students, but the best are awesome, and they can do work just as demanding as master's students can do. Executives are quite different. I'll say a word or 2 about that as we go on. Then the question to think about is, what are you trying to teach them? Are you trying to teach them about better ways of doing strategy or business management generally? Are you trying to teach them about system dynamics? Are you trying to get them actually to build models, or are you trying to get them comfortable with using systems thinking ideas? And that choice has very different implications for the exercises you give them and how you assess their learning. We'll talk about some of the different kinds of exercises. There are some manual diagrammatic exercises that you can do, and there are models you can use to support what you do, small models for simple things and big models to get over more complex ideas. I will also talk about some of the locked up games that you can use for particularly for management training purposes. So we'll end with saying something about assessing people's learning, and what you're after when you're assessing people's learning is for them to show that they can understand the dynamics of a situation, that they can use that understanding to manage the situation better. If appropriate, that they can build models. If you're trying to teach people modelling, obviously you need them to show you that they can build models. And a crucial point, I think it came up actually on Wednesday, is for them to demonstrate that they can transfer their knowledge from one setting to another. So, given a model of business A, can they look at business B and say, well, I can transfer the principles from case A to case B? And then we'll end up with some questions and comments. Now, just a reminder of the fundamental questions we're trying to answer and what strategy dynamics helps us with. It's understanding how historic events and decisions have brought us to today. It's understanding where performance might go in future if external events and our decisions are not so good. And ultimately, the ultimate purpose, of course, is to figure out how to bring about a better performance out into the future. And those performance aims can be financial or non-financial, and they can deal with the whole organisation or a part of an organisation or a function or a business unit. So I repeated this slide from earlier webinars because if you're trying to help people learn and get them to demonstrate to you that they have learned, then this is the set of answers that they should be able to explain to you by the time they've been through your teaching. So a good place to start is with the learning aims. And this is a statement of the learning aims I put at the beginning of my degree level course for management. So this is a course where I am not expecting the participants to build working models. I'm expecting them to demonstrate they can understand. So by the end of this course, you will be able to understand and, crucially, explain to other people too why an organisation's quantified performance, either the whole organisation or on some particular issue, has come to its current situation where performance may change in future and how to substantially improve that performance. So that's a learning aim. This is a pretty common aim I have when I'm trying to teach executive audiences rather than degree course students. That quite a lot of executives I'm teaching are really not interested in building business models. They have people who do that for them, and they can send those people on courses if that's what they want to do. What they need is the ability to understand and explain that organisational performance over time and know how to use that understanding to make better decisions and improve performance in future. That's very different, of course, from your aims if you're actually trying to teach people how to build models. So when I'm teaching modelling, here are my aims. You will be able to build simple dynamic models of common situations. The word simple is quite important there because I've been building models for 15 years and I still trip up and fall over and make mistakes. So to think at the end of a 1-week course that you can build complicated dynamic models is asking a bit much. So by the end of this course, you'll be able to build simple dynamic models of common situations for business cases or other situations with real world data. This is really important. You'll be able to put real world data into your models and compare it with what your model's actually doing, and use those models to explain historic performance, project that performance out into the future, and make improvements certainly to the way in which the system is being managed by the organisation, and maybe actually to design fundamental improvements to what that system actually is. So those are the main purposes when you're trying to teach people about actually building models. As we go, if anyone has any additional points, or if, for example, they've got somewhat different learning aims, then feel free to pop them on the chat, and we'll see if we can refer back to those as we go on with the presentation. So here are the two dimensions. Who are we trying to teach, and what are we trying to teach them about? And I've kind of split it up into simple categories: executives, undergraduates, and kind of more advanced degree student cases. So if I'm teaching strategy or other management topics, so I'm not trying to teach about the building of models in this row here. What do I need? Well, I need to give executives simple exercises. Those exercises need to look something like situations that they actually have to deal with, and they need models to learn from. If you move across to undergraduates, I'm not implying for a moment, by the way, that executives are less intelligent than undergraduates. I'm simply implying here that our learning aspirations with executive groups are typically somewhat less than with undergraduates, simply because we've only got them for a day or two, whereas for an undergraduate degree class we've got them for 10 weeks or 14 weeks or whatever. Again, though, with undergraduates, simple exercises, and I made the point in a previous webinar that it's easy to not understand how little many undergraduates understand about the real world. You know, they've been at home with their families, and they've grown up through school, and they've done whatever they do in their leisure time. They don't understand the business world in many cases. Some do, because they've taken trouble to find out, but most, you can assume, don't really understand very much about business at all. What that means then is that you need to use familiar cases, and I mentioned in an earlier webinar situations like restaurants or airlines or local stores, for example, and online examples too. If they're commonly using Amazon or eBay or Facebook, then use those kinds of examples, things that they are likely to have come across. Again, we're using models to learn from at this level, and little more than that. When you get up to MBAs and MSCs and PhDs, of course, they've been around a bit. Some of them have worked between their undergraduate degree and their postgraduate degree, so they know a bit more about the real world. So now you can get a bit more sophisticated and start using some more complex examples. I've got a post here from Gary saying his interest is on organisational learning, and he'd be grateful for any thought he has on that. I'll just make one side comment on organisational learning at this point. The very last class in the Strategy Dynamics programme is about the strategic concept of capabilities. And capabilities are a combination of the skills of individuals in a team, the routines and procedures that team uses, and the information that they need to do the task that team does. So learning for that team is about capability building, and capability is built from actually doing what it is you do. We talked about Ryanair in an earlier webinar. This is an airline which has now opened well over 1,000 routes to serve its travelling customers. Well, when you've opened 1,000 routes before, you know how to do the 1,001st route really, really well. That's an example of isolated learning within a particular team in an organisation. Well, if you replicate that principle across all of the things that an organisation needs to do, then that represents organisational learning. So organisational learning is all the parts of the organisation getting better at doing the many things that they need to do. So it happens that is an example of one of the little strategy frameworks that we introduce, and it is actually in that executive and undergraduate and master's learning material that we use on the course. So just moving on, if you're trying to get people to learn how to actually build models, then with executives, you've really got to start with what they know. And the kinds of things they know are, they know what an income statement looks like, they know what a balance sheet looks like, they know what a sales report, a monthly sales success report looks like, they know what a spreadsheet looks like. So you've really got to start from those standard things they know and understand, and give them a connection from that to the way in which a dynamic representation of those same things actually looks. And I've tried to do quite a bit of that in the Strategy Dynamics course, because I've got quite a lot of scars from trying to start somewhere else and losing the executive audiences when you do that. The other thing is that executives expect simple explanations about things. They can't cope. They've got no patience with abstract ideas or kind of mystical concepts. They understand that sales comes from their sales force's efforts, for example. They understand that customers evaluate their service quality. So those are simple, firm concepts, and those need to be in whatever it is you teach people how to do. So I lose patience sometimes with models that I see from people that have got these kind of abstract ideas in them that actually there's no way of measuring in the real world, and managers wouldn't recognize them anyway. Then the third thing you need with executives is realistic models that look very like the things they're familiar with, that they can copy and adapt to their own purposes. And the course is full of those. I've tried my best to do as many of those as I can. In the case of undergraduates, well, they don't know very much anyway, so you've got to replace that with information about simple cases. And I explained in an earlier webinar that certain restaurant businesses and certain airline businesses actually do come with quite good information to work from. But it is a challenge finding good information on cases that are simple enough for undergrads to get their heads around. Stick to the same simple quantified logic again, and with the exercises, give them realistic models, not just to copy and adapt, but actually to build those models from scratch. I think, was it Gary or was it somebody else on an earlier webinar this week, gave us a few bullet points about how they go through the process, and that was exactly what they did. Give them models to copy first, expect them to adapt those models, and then give them a new situation and ask them to build those models from first principles. And then, of course, with MScs and PhDs, you can be a bit more brutal and give them really challenging and difficult things to do. If you're coming from a desire to teach about systems thinking, then I don't do this, so I'm not really best qualified to talk about this. But when I did do it, I used to try to work on giving executive audiences in particular simple qualitative logic about how the system they're working in actually is structured and what the possible behaviours are that come out from that. But again, you can use models there for them to learn from and to copy for their own situation. Same with pretty much the same with undergraduates and MScs, although you can obviously go a lot further with them. There are many big PhD and MSc theses out there, quite a lot of them in the public domain, I think, where you can see exactly how a master's student or a PhD student has built up a kind of feedback causal loop diagram interpretation of what they've tried to do. And very often they've actually done it with a live audience of people who own the problem that they're working on, and you can use those examples for other masters and PhD level people to try to work on from. So I hope that's kind of covered the kinds of choices you have to make depending on the audience you're trying to address and what you want them to learn. So let's move on to different types of exercises. And first thing to say is that there should be quizzes in certainly in any degree level course, multiple choice type questions about working things out. I'm I don't have much patience actually with multiple choice only quizzes. I don't really think they show very much learning at all, other than kind of parrot type recollection. Do you remember the 3 things I said 10 minutes ago? It's much more challenging to offer quizzes where people have actually got to do some working out of numbers from things. I'm afraid that as yet we haven't got to the point of completing quizzes for the online course, but it is something that we'll be working on over the coming months, and hopefully that'll, if you want to use that course, that's something that will take a bit of work away from you. If you can tell the students to go away and do the quiz, and the quiz will mark itself and you don't have to bother, then hopefully that'll save you some work and you can spend your valuable class time on more important and useful things. We do try to get people to work things out from first principles, and not always using software to do it. So we provide worksheets that really support the whole of the course, and you can apply the frameworks in those worksheets manually or in software, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Yes, there are models from small structures that illustrate particular points to whole business models. And it's worth mentioning that small models can be really, really powerful and valuable on their own. And they can be unbelievably quick to use. You can do a really useful exercise in class in 10 to 15 minutes with one of these small models. And the strategy people I talk with who teach strategy in business schools, they seem to have got it in their head that business models and games take a week to run, and they have 12 decision rounds, and each decision round takes an afternoon or something. Well, that's a pretty old-fashioned mindset about the way in which models and games can be used for people to learn. You can learn much, much faster than that. And these small models are just great for that. I know lots of other people use them as well. This isn't something I've invented. I know lots of people have been doing this as well. Then, of course, you can go on to bigger games, but they're sometimes called Microworlds in our field. Microworld isn't just a name we decided to invent because it sounds sexy. It actually is quite reasonably well defined. It was first used to define computer-based learning games by a guy called Seymour Papert, educational psychologist, I think. There may be people on this call who know more about Seymour Papert than I do, but I believe he was the first person to use that term, microworlds. Other people would just recognise them as business games, but the distinction is that this is a business game which is quite tightly linked to a very realistic case description of how a particular situation works. So let me just start then by going back to these worksheets that I've talked about. And every class in the course is supported by one or more of these worksheets. And if you go to help.sistea.com, you'll find the worksheets all listed there. I mean, the reason that they're in the software help system is simply that that's where the working models of these worksheets are as well. You can just click on those worksheets and use them live in your browser. And the one on the left I'm showing here is actually worksheet 9. I mentioned the strategy principle known as the experience curve in an earlier call. Well, this is how the experience curve works. As you accumulate more and more sales of your product, then you get more and more efficient at the production of that product, and you drive down unit costs. So you've got a stock of unit costs down at the bottom of that diagram there, and the more you grow those cumulative sales up at the top, the faster those unit costs drive down. But of course, the more you have produced, the longer it takes to accumulate a further growth rate. So the unit cost reduction slows down over time. It's a slightly technical example, but it just happens to be pretty much the only strategy concept from the strategy world that is really dynamically pretty robust. All the others are kind of checklists and 2x2 boxes and that kind of thing, which we folk with a system dynamics frame of mind think we can do a little bit better than. So let me just see if I can. Actually, no, I'll just go on to the next one before I give you an example of the model. So this screenshot on the left, this is a screenshot from that website, the help system for Sistea, and it is specifically worksheet 9, the experience curve. And every one of these, there is a worksheet at the top of the page, and then if you scroll down, there's actually a worked example of how it's actually used. So here is the list of the worksheets that are there, and the first 5 of those really take you through the first part of the strategy dynamics principles, putting together this idea of a core central architecture of how the business system works. From 6, 7, 8 down to, actually most of that list, in fact, from 6 down to 12, we're adding some important additional frameworks to that core architecture. We talk about how resources develop. That's a pipeline of stocks in system dynamics language. We talk about, I mentioned the experience curve is number 9, and 10 to 12 is a really important set of concepts about how competition works, how competition plays out over time. I've used this a few times now, quite a few times now. I have to say, I think Dynamics has got so much stronger grasp on how rivalry plays out and how to manage it than the static frameworks that currently exist in the strategy world. Worksheet 13 talks about policy control. We talk about quality and reputation intangibles in worksheet 14, and then worksheet 15 is that capability thing that I mentioned earlier in my answer to Gary's post. So let me just explain this bit about how these small structures add to what the core principles of strategy dynamics can tell you. In classes 1 to 4, we build up this core idea that profit comes from revenue minus cost, revenue comes from customers, costs come from product, staff and capacity, and those things provide the capacities to serve the demand from customers and keep those customers happy. So that, if you like, is the simplest possible core of what any business model looks like. There aren't many businesses that don't have those things in them. And once you've got that core, you can then add details to it. So in class 5, we talk about the attributes or qualities of resources, bigger customers, more profitable customers, not just customer numbers, products that are very appealing to customers rather than less appealing, staff with more experience and less experience, and so on. In class 6, we talk about resources developing through stages, product pipelines, for example, or customer pipelines. In 7, we talk about competition. In 8, we talk about policy. In 9, these intangibles, things like reputation, morale, data and information comes up there. And in class 10, we talk about capabilities. But the point I just want to make is that, yes, all of those can be added to a core architecture, and you may only need to add 1 or 2 or 3 of those, depending on the business situation you're trying to understand. But each of these can be really useful on their own. And this is great news when you're trying to explain things to executives, because you don't have to take them all the way to understanding a whole business if all you want them to understand is how a customer pipeline works, for example, or how staff experience changes when you hire people and train people and lose people. If you're just focusing on one of those particular isolated issues, you can just teach that on its own, using the frameworks in each of those individual separate parts of the course. As I say, all the class material is accessible for teachers who register with us, so you'll see this when you take the classes or go have a look at the classes. So this is a little bit further down that page from the help system, the worksheet 9 page. So at the top of the page we've got the very simple structure about the experience curve. And if you look at the bottom right of that big complicated scary diagram you can see there, that is the little piece of the experience curve which is driving down unit cost in the launch of a product. The upper left part of the model is a simple diffusion model. It's for those who have come across this before, it's the Bass diffusion model for how a product penetrates a market, driven by marketing and driven by word of mouth, and how it ultimately runs out of potential because you've used up all of those potential customers. So what this worked application example does on the worksheet 9 page is it says, here is a basic framework, the experience curve, and here is how it fits in a bigger picture of how a pretty widespread business concept actually plays out. So let me just give you, I hope this link works, this should actually launch that product launch model, and it's looking promising. So you should see on your screen now the product launch model. By the way, with these models, F11 makes you go full screen, so you get the best use out of the model that you can. I do hope people are seeing this. If not, perhaps you could just let me know on the chat. So this is what happens when you click on any of the links to any of the learning models in the course. The model opens in simulation mode, and if you look down at the charts here, you can see that they have all played out some numbers over time. You can simply stop the simulation and run it again. And now you can play this through. So this is a product launch model, and if I just scroll down a little bit, it shows a history of your decisions up here on the left. Your results will play out next to that, and down below that is the working guts of the model itself, which is pretty much the screenshot I just showed you. So what you can do, there's a range of parameters on the left hand side, and the model lists all of those parameters. But what I've done in these models is I've highlighted the things I want people to use when they are trying to work as if they were a management team. So the management team here have got two decisions to make. How much am I going to spend on marketing? That's a decision. And how much am I going to charge for the product? I'm currently charging $180. Now, my unit cost is pretty high when I start, because I haven't made any of this thing before. If you imagine making the iPad for the first time, the first iPad must have been very, very expensive to make indeed. It wasn't a few $100s, it was many thousands of dollars. But the more you make of this thing, the more its price will come down. Sorry, the more its cost will come down. You can then choose to drive the price down if you wish, and build that market strongly. So let me just play this out for a little bit. $200,000 a month in marketing is peanuts. So I'll put the marketing up, and I'll play this out for 6 months or so, 12 months. Why not? There we go. So I've captured a significant fraction of the market now. So I'm beginning to capture market, but you can see that I'm losing tons of money. I'm losing lots of money at the bottom of this profit chart here. So maybe I need to start getting some sales, and I could do that maybe by cutting the price. Let me cut the price to 120. Play that out maybe to month 24, and yeah, I'm still losing money, but my sales are now increasing. And if I look a little bit further down in the model itself, I can see that my potential customer base is being developed. They are moving across and becoming active consumers. If I look further down still, I can see that growth in sales is driving down the unit cost of this product, and the unit cost now is only $89 odd. See if I can zoom that a bit to see that a bit more clearly. There we go, that's $89. So at $120, I'm making a nice margin. Maybe I should try and actually cut that price a little bit more, maybe just $100. What will that do? Well, I'm going to give away quite a lot of margin on my product if I do that. But maybe I'll get it back with a substantial increase in sales. And you'll see over on the right, my sales to first-time buyers have grown, but I'm also getting repeat buyers. I'm getting people coming back and upgrading the product and buying the product again. So let's see what happens if I just play that out for another maybe 12 or 18 months. Yeah, well, that's looking pretty good, but unfortunately, I'm still losing money. Why am I losing money? I'm losing $540,000 a month. But oh yeah, I remember now. I'm spending $800,000 in marketing, but just about everybody knows about this product now, so maybe I don't need to spend that much anymore. Let me cut that to just $100,000 a month and play that out till the end. And oh yeah, look, I've jumped into profit here, and unfortunately, the net present value of this strategy isn't so good. But at least I'm profitable by the end. So let me just kind of stop that example right there and take this out. So that's an example of one of these small models. As I say, you can play that out in just a few minutes in class. You can just about play these models on a tablet or an iPad or something like that. It's not really, the screen is a little bit too busy to really do that. But if you're in a class setting where people have got Wi-Fi access, they can get their laptops out and they can working in groups of 2 or 3, by the way, works really well. It doesn't even matter if you're in a tiered lecture theatre. You don't have to go to flat rooms and have lots of big table space for people. You can do this in a tiered lecture theatre. So there's that example I've just taken you through, and there's a screenshot there to remind you what we've just done. The example on screen is a slightly better performance than I just managed to achieve. But there are lots of these, and if you've got examples of your own, I really would encourage you to turn them into these simple games that people can play. Most of the software packages that do system dynamics models will offer some way in which you can put together a pretty simple game, and students these days are pretty smart cookies. They'll figure out how to use these things. So what do we do then in class? Well, we use models like that to give people management challenges. When I'm trying to teach people about strategy and management ideas, I'm not trying to teach them at this point about building models. I would give them a model like this, and then I would issue them with a challenge. So I'd say to them, for example, what's the earliest time you can make this product profitable? That you might have seen that particular product launch was pretty difficult to get it into a profit-making situation. So figuring out how to do that is not trivial at all. And then you can compare and contrast what different groups have done. Or you could simply say, well, what's the best profit you can make by the end of year 5? Or what's the best net present value you can create? And then you can start adding some additional realism to this and impose the kind of constraints that real people in the real world actually face. So what's the best profit you can make by the end of the year 5, and you're not allowed to lose more than $400,000 a month at any point in time, or you cannot go more than 10 million cash negative during the launch of this product. These are real constraints in the real world. You can't do that kind of thing without being limited by some kind of policy from senior management or from investors, indeed. So what that does is it makes that link from structure to behaviour and what it implies for policy and decision making. We're not trying at this point to teach people how to build these models. We're trying to teach them about management using models. But now you can say, well, what if this situation was slightly different? What if the behaviour of the particular marketplace you're involved in hasn't got quite the same characteristics? So you can go back to those other parameters in the model. Let me just drag that back onto screen for you and show you here. Right, so where was I? Yeah, where I was there are lots of other parameters in this model, like the marketing reach. So how much marketing is, what fraction of people who are reached by the marketing actually buy the product each month. The strength of the word of mouth relationships between people is something you can change. You could say, well, what happens if the unit cost of the product falls faster each time you double cumulative sales? So as I was saying in the presentation part of this here, you can then say to the students or say to the executives, go and change some of those other parameters and try again. See what difference it makes if you've got a stronger word of mouth effect, or if you've got a faster fall in unit costs, or what if marketing isn't quite as effective as it is in the base case. And you could go on all day playing around with different ideas of that kind with any one of these games, or any of the games that you already use, or any of the models you already use. So the next level of these models are these Microworld business games, and all that a Microworld is a locked up model. It's a model that the user can't fiddle with the relationships. They can't fiddle with anything that you don't want them to fiddle with, and it also presents the way the business is working in a more accessible way than using a piece of slightly kind of technical software. There are lots and lots of these out there now. Many of you are probably familiar with the People Express model that John Sturman at MIT built many, many years ago. I think 1989 he built it. So that's been a pretty long-lived business game. It's still very popular, still very effective. And you may wonder why we built a LoFare Airline Microworld when that one already exists. Well, the reason that we did that was because we wanted to play out some more of the things that happen in the real world. And I'm getting a question from Shelley. Okay, let's take them in order here. Florian saying, when you do these exercises in class, do you provide a real world case around them that the students can relate to? That would be ideal if you can. So in the case of airlines, yeah, I would definitely use a case study on one of these airlines. There is a really, really good case study on the Ryanair airline. I think I mentioned this on Monday, published by somebody at Dublin University Business School. I think you've got to be a little bit careful. We talked about the availability of data for doing these things, and one of the problems with ordinary case studies is that very few of them have got very much in the way of data, and certainly they've got very little in the way of time-based data, which is really what you need if you're going to get people to really understand the dynamics of a situation. But those cases can be a really good thing to start from. If you're a strategy teacher, for example, or a marketing teacher or an HR teacher or whatever, you can start from a case study. You can use the standard frameworks from strategy or marketing or organizational behavior that you want to talk about, and then you can say, right, well, now let's move on and see about actually managing this thing. And Florian's saying he was referring more to cases around the students playing with the worksheets. If you're using, if you've given the students one of these worksheets to work with, maybe you've given them a staff development pipeline model to work with, for example, then you can send them away and say, well, go find a case of your own where you can see staff development issues are quite important, and come back with the worksheet adapted to demonstrate how the staff development numbers in that particular case are working. Shelley's asking, can the Microworld be used on the site for an online class? Well, we were asked about online classes a long time ago, and actually making models work in online classes is quite challenging technologically. Well, it's not it's not challenging, it's just is a lot of work. But the great thing now is that you can use services, actually, even Skype you can do this with, where you can deliver a class and do screen sharing, so you can share. Let me just backtrack here. Let's say you've given a group of students a task to go away and do some learning with one of the models or with one of the microworlds. Well, they could be, those students could be in 4 different parts of the world. If they use one of these online meeting systems, one of them could run the game on their laptop. They could share it with the 3 or 4 other people in their team over the web. They can use the internet voice conferencing facility, just as we're doing right now, and they could do a group exercise together. So actually, we don't need these things to be able to be online enabled for multiple people to work with them from multiple places all at the same time. It would be nice, but it's technologically quite complex and demanding. That, by the way, is the kind of thing that some of these monster business strategy games that business schools use, that they do that kind of thing. But they have armies of people sitting in call centres helping students and groups figure out how to do that. We have an army of one here. It's Christina, who's sitting right next to me. So we have to be a little bit more, shall we say, efficient in our use of human resources. Right? Yeah. It's one thing to say to people, "Here's how something works." It's quite another for them to actually get in and experience how it works. And a really important point here is that with these games, because they're so much faster and more accessible than the big monster games, students or executive teams can run through them many times, and that means that they get lots and lots of learning out of just a single exercise. It's like, I know the analogy has been overused, but you wouldn't get in an aeroplane that was flown by somebody who'd never used a flight simulator. And a flight simulator allows the pilot to practice all kinds of things over and over and over again, and that's a really good thing. Well, wouldn't it be nice if managers practice things over and over and over again before we let them loose on our real world businesses? It would have been nice, wouldn't it, if the senior executives in the banking industry had actually played a game of the subprime mortgage market sometime between 2005 and 2008. Maybe there would be quite a lot of pain would have been avoided if that had happened. So there we are. That's a Microworld. It's a locked up business game. There's just a screenshot showing how we explain the structure of a particular part. This is the expansion of the route network for this particular airline, and the decision box in the game allows people to make decisions about how many routes to add. Are they going to add routes where they compete with other low fare competitors, or are they going to try and find new routes where they'll be on their own? And the diagram on the right is simply showing where that particular decision fits in the rest of the business model. So on to assessment. How are we going to assess people? Well, with executives, we don't really usually have to assess executives, although sometimes they actually want to assess themselves, and they quite appreciate having little quizzes where they can test their own understanding. And we certainly use those game challenges in executive groups. We send them off in groups to develop a business plan for something and then actually run that model or that game and try to do their best against that business challenge that we've set. With undergraduates, and then simple manual quizzes are important. Model exercises like the one I've just taken you through with the product launch model would work really well. And an important part of this is knowledge transfer. Like I've just given you a generic description of a product launch situation for a consumer durable. Well, how has that actually played out for the iPad? How is it actually playing out for some other particular piece of consumer technology? How might it play out for the next generation of games consoles? And of course, when you get to the MScs and PhDs, you can be really mean and nasty and give them really tough quizzes and exams, and you can give them tougher modelling exercises. But again, you really do need to include a little bit of assessment to show that they can transfer the learning from the game that they've been playing to other situations. If you're trying to teach people how to build models, again, you won't be kind of assessing executives on executive courses if you're doing that, but they will want to see that they can build a model too that looks as though it does the same kind of thing as the model you've built. When you get on to undergraduates and postgraduates, then you can do a certain amount with quizzes. You can do a certain amount with getting them to copy and adapt models that you provide them with, as I think Gary was mentioning to us a few days ago. But then, at some point, you've got to cut the strings and set them adrift and get them to build these things themselves. And then they have to understand the math relationships, and they have to build simple models, and they have to build many of them. You're not going to demonstrate good mastery of model building just by building one model, like the best diffusion model or something. I think I mentioned this on the first webinar. Do remind people that you're not doing anything mysterious with these models at all. The relationships in mathematical terms are no different at all than the relationships that they would build in a spreadsheet. The only difference is that you're laying it out and showing the causal structure, and you're showing the behavior over time of all the things in that causal structure. If we could just get students and executives to understand that simple translation of what they already know how to do, I think we'd make really great progress. The same applies to masters and PhDs, but obviously you get a bit tougher with them. If you're teaching systems thinking, as I say, I'm not best qualified to comment on this. I don't know if Jean Bellinger is on the call today or not, but if not, you should hook up with Jean on his Systems Thinking World group in LinkedIn, where there's a huge number of people, and Jean himself, who do an awful lot based on building these systems thinking models. But I think the principle again is somewhat similar, that you're trying to copy and adapt, in this case, qualitative models to different kinds of situations, even though you're not including any maths in those models. So, how do you assess learning? Well, I've just included here an extract from my marking scheme. Actually, this is an extract from my degree level course. It's not a degree program, it's just a single semester course on strategy dynamics. So I ask students to do two things, whether it's with a model or whether it's with one of these microworlds. The first is to carry out a management experiment, and for this experiment to be well done, they need to specify in advance objectives that they are trying to achieve when they run a model over a period of time, aiming to achieve some particular outcome. So they should be defining those objectives at the outset, and then they should be included a well-defined strategy for how what they're going to do is going to achieve those objectives. Then they should definitely be demonstrating that they're using time charts of actual and expected performance to guide their decision making as they're running this game, as they're running this simulated business situation. And then when they get to the end and they discuss that, this is a write-up, this is something they've written for me, when they discuss how their actual results compared with what they expected, does that demonstrate good understanding, that they really get the idea of what causes what in this structure, and they've used that well to guide their decision making? I should say, by the way, that there are other games that we provide for this, and we use them in our courses. There's a restaurant chain game. There's a game about a consulting firm. There's a very small game on an online bank, and the same principles I've just mentioned apply to these simple models as well, not just these locked up games. The second aspect of learning, though, is this ability to transfer that learning. So the second part of what I ask students to do for me is to give me a written description with quantified charts that show that they can take what they learnt from the game or the model and apply it to a different situation. So here are the criteria. Have they chosen a situation that illustrates the point well? When students use the consulting firm model, for example, I ask them to look for other situations in which the development of staff through different levels of experience is important. So the consulting model has consultants, managers and partners. It's a three-stock chain of staff levels. Some students have drawn parallels with some quite extraordinary things, actually. One of them is not so extraordinary. That's the way in which faculty develop through stages in a university or a business school. There are levels that happen there, but there are levels too in situations like one student wrote up a paper about the Jehovah's Witnesses, which has a hierarchical staff structure. The beauty of the Jehovah's Witnesses is that they documented absolutely everything. So the student was able to use some real world data to make their case. Another student talked about a terrorist organisation in terms of the foot soldiers and the mid-level people and the leadership who lead those terrorist organisations. Then the second question is, have they explained the behaviour of the situation that they think is related to what the game showed? And crucially, and this is really, really important, have they then said what management should have done about that situation? So if they're reporting about a terrorist organisation, have they explained what counter-terrorist activity really ought to be doing to undermine that particular organisation, or have they explained how the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, should develop a stronger group of people? So that's the transfer of learning piece. Now I'm conscious I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'll just have to wrap things up. When people build models, there's a whole load of standard criteria to assess whether models are good or are sound models or not. The additional things I would add, though, is are they, when you're doing the strategy dynamics approach, do things follow the rules of the approach? And one of the rules I really insist on, people from a systems thinking background, please forgive me for this, but if you're doing my stuff, I tell them I never ever want to see a causal structure without any data in it. If you don't have any data in it, you can't demonstrate that the causal structure has any validity. So students are expected to show at least some data to demonstrate that the causal relationships that they're putting into their models is reasonably valid. Have they chosen, have made a good choice of timescale? Is this business plan playing out over the next 6 months, or is it 10 years? If you're in the utility industry, you're making decisions that will play out 20 years into the future. If you're in Facebook, making decisions that will play out over the next few weeks. Is the model behaviour consistent with what the data's saying? So from this point on, it's all kind of, and are those items practical and realistic? Could an executive in the situation actually go and find this stuff out and use it to make better decisions? And from then on, all the other standard criteria for evaluating system dynamics models apply. And I don't have time. It's probably not relevant for this audience to go into those. You can go and find out about those criteria offline. So there we go. I apologise for running a couple of minutes over. So some questions that I'd be interested to hear about from you is what kinds of groups do you teach? What exercises do you give them? What exercises would you like to give them if you haven't got any already? What's your experience of how well people learn? I've found many years of trying to teach dynamic modelling really pretty frustrating. It's quite tough for people to learn that stuff. So that's why I've worked so hard over the last few years, really trying to simplify the process and make the process very logical. So if you go through the steps, doing it the way it's supposed to be done, you should end up with a good working model. So what's your experience been of how well people actually learn? How do you assess people? So, okay, I've got some questions coming in here. Shell is asking, are you planning to run the class for faculty? I guess Shell is asking, am I planning to run a teacher's course? Sorry, to run the course with a group of participants who are all teachers. Now, I think that would be something I'd be happy to do, actually. Florian, who's on this list, has already gone through the course independently on his own, and one or two other faculty have done so. But I think doing it with a group has all kinds of advantages. People can build on each other's experience and share experiences, and questions that one person will bring up will definitely be questions that other people would have brought up if only they'd thought about it. So I think I could and probably should try to do that at some point. I'm not sure when I'll be able to do it, but it shouldn't be too far away. Viewer 17 is saying, I would like to start with a pilot group using a simple model in logistics service. So I guess Viewer 17 is looking at an executive audience where they're trying to, or a group of people particularly focused on the issues of effective management of logistics services. Logistics is not a major strength of mine. I've got some clue how the principles work, but there's lots and lots being written about logistics models in the system dynamics world. And if anyone else is interested in that, you could go to the System Dynamics Society's forum or the System Dynamics group on LinkedIn and post a question, or post a question on our group as well, asking if people have got simple learning models related to logistics. Of course, there is the classic physical model, the beer game model that's been around for decades, which illustrates some points about the principles of logistics chains. But I guess Viewer 17 is asking for something a little bit more complex than that. So Shelley's giving us some of his experience from using the People Express game. And yeah, a really useful thing to do is to ask people what they would have done differently. Oh, sorry, after the case. Right, so teach the case. The case describes how this business went really, really well and then basically died and burnt and collapsed. So you teach the case, and after teaching the case, you ask them what they would have done differently from the management in that case, and then hit them with the game and tell them to do what they said. It will be no surprise that quite a lot of teams will go bust in the game, just in the way that the management of People Express went bust as well, and that gives you a real good context for discussing why both the management and the students themselves actually went wrong. What was it about the system that they mismanaged, or even what was it about the system that was badly designed in the first place? Florian's saying, Bachelor students modelling. Students are asked to build a small model based on a real-world managerial challenge of their choice in groups of 3. Yeah, good principle. Okay, so we're a little bit early to get Florian's feedback on how well that's worked, because he's waiting for the students' results from doing that, and then ask them to submit a handwritten report and share their model with you. Right. That's a very good point to mention here. There are ways of sharing models. Obviously, if you're using Vensim or I think, you can get people to post their model files somewhere. But with both Gene's application, Insight Maker, and with Sistea, it is dead easy to share models with each other. All you do is send people the share link. to the model. The application runs in the web browser. You don't install anything. The web browser runs the model. And that means all you need to do is send people a link. I should say, by the way, that all of the models in the course come in two versions. There's a version that is got a kind of disguised code, which we only give out to teachers. And that's a code which gives you access to the model in a way that you can actually copy it for yourself, go away and change it, do whatever you like with it. There is another set of codes where the models are read-only. So if the students go to those models, they can play with the model, they can change the parameters, they can make as many different experiments with those models as they like. What they can't do is they can't copy the model itself. So if you're trying to teach people how to build models, it might be quite useful having models that they can't copy initially. So they can't duplicate, they can't take a copy of the working model themselves and cheat. Then you could give them the open link at a later point. Jose saying, how many hours do you estimate for a course with the basics and its broad structure? Would that be the 10 classes you mentioned before? Right. The whole course is 10. It's actually 11 classes because class 4 is quite big and we split it into 2 bits. And there are 2 break weeks in the process as well. So altogether, the thing runs over 14 weeks. That's the whole course from soup to nuts. But recognizing that is really quite a banquet to try to eat your way through all in one go, we've broken the course into 3 big parts. And classes 1 to 4 are the first part, and then 5 to 7 and 8 to 10. Now, if you're going to take the whole course, as I say, it takes about 14 weeks, and my students tell me that they spend somewhere around 5 or 6 hours a week on each class, plus time writing up the assignments. So that, that's quite demanding. You can. I'm getting a question: how much in-class time does a class that I'm teaching actually run? Well, the videos for the classes, there's a summary video segment of about half an hour, and then there are 2 to 4 supplementary videos of 10 to 15 minutes. So somewhere, an hour and 15 minutes in total, listening to presentations like I've just been giving this afternoon. But as I say, there's more hours of work around that. But you don't have to do quite that much. Sorry, students don't have to do quite that much if you're not assessing them. If you're working with busy executives, they could just spend an hour or 2 doing work on the models. Joachim is saying MBA courses, MSc and PhD, real world problems to model and explain. Let's say not happy with the results we get from in terms of learning. And they assess people by asking them, good point. Yeah, don't forget to get the students to give presentations about what they've done. Give presentations to each other about their models and get them to critique each other's analysis. If you're just teaching management or strategy, then get them to do presentations on what their strategy was and how well they did and what they should have done differently, and get the other students to challenge them. One instructor I know actually gets them to write a mini business plan, and then they present that business plan to the other groups before they run the game. And then they are asked to come back afterwards and explain effectively to the board of directors why their business plan failed, or how well they did compared with their business plan. So yeah, definitely get students to present back to each other. I've answered Shelley's question. What you could do, we've yet to figure out how to make this possible for you, but what you could do is rather than you give the lecture, you could get the students to go and view the lecture online that's in our course. We'll have to figure out a way of licensing people to do that. But there's a lot of pressure, I know, out there in the university world to get much better staff-student ratios. They want as many students through per staff person as possible, as many students per staff hour as possible. So being able to get to get the students to go and learn offline and then use your precious class time for discussing what they've learned is quite important. So yeah, we're definitely looking at ways in which we can make access to the video classes themselves available for people to use in class. Stefan's telling us he's teaching both students and masters, and he's teaching them modelling. He too uses real challenges from business cases. Right. Yeah, this is a comment we quite often get. Stefan's saying his students are telling him that they're learning more about the dynamics of business from doing the dynamics classes than they do from any other class they take in their business degree. I have a friend who teaches at one of the universities near us here, who teaches students in year 4 of a 4-year business degree, and one student came up to him when I was in the class, and he said, "Do you know, I've been doing these business studies for 4 years now, and that's the first time I've actually understood what a business actually is." So maybe that's a message you can go and kind of drop into conversation over coffee with your faculty colleagues from other departments in the university. Maybe that'll get them intrigued and interested and invite you into their courses to teach a class or two. Stefan uses assessments, written reports, differences between bachelor and master's students, more adequate representation of variables. Yeah. Master's students just do have a slightly more realistic grasp of the world than undergrads will do. I guess I'm still not getting Shelley's question. 3 hours per week for 14 weeks. Yes, the course is designed to follow a pretty standard 14-week semester structure. 14 plus or minus 1 or 2. If you've got 15 weeks, that's good. If you've got 12 weeks, you can cut some bits out. And it was designed around 3 hours of class time per week. So that's, let's say, an hour and a half of presentation time, an hour and a half of getting them to do exercises in class, plus an hour or 2 of work outside of class that they do on their own. So yeah, you should find that the course structure falls quite naturally into a 14-week semester structure with something like 3 hours of class time per week. Maybe Florian or others who've actually tried this can just let us know in due course whether that expectation of mine is actually being fulfilled or not. Well, we're well over time. Any other questions or comments at all? While you're just thinking, if you have got any more questions or comments, let me just thank everyone for sticking with us over this period of time. These have been 3 pretty substantial webinars, and I'm just so delighted that we've had quite a lot of folks stick with us all the way through. And we will be sending out a survey to get some feedback from you folk about how you felt about it, and also to collect some of your views and experiences. And please do remember that there is the Strategy Dynamics Network on LinkedIn, where we're very happy to take teacher questions and student questions and executive questions and discussions on that. And there is the forum on strategydynamics.com, which includes a specific forum section devoted to teachers. So thank you once again. I don't think there are any other questions coming through or any other comments that I should be responding to. So, great. Well, I do hope that the recording has worked. If it has, you'll be hearing from us. If it hasn't, you'll also be hearing from us, but with a slightly more disappointing message. What is the LinkedIn address URL? If you just go to LinkedIn, that's the networking service called LinkedIn. It's a professional networking service. If you're not familiar with it, it's a professional version of Facebook. It's really good for this kind of thing, and you can join a group, and the group I have is called Strategy Dynamics Network. I just key strategy dynamics into the search box, you'll find it. Great, goody. Right, well, it looks as though we've got some interest in running that teacher's course, so we'll give some thought to doing that. Thank you all once again, and have a great weekend and have a great year. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again further in the future. Bye for now.